When the HOA told me to repaint my house beige or face daily fines, I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. That's when I decided I wasn't just roll over, I was going to fight back with a lawyer. And what happened next? Let's just say the beige war turned into something a lot bigger. This isn't just about paint. This is about freedom, power, and the price of standing your ground. Stick around, because by the end, you might rethink what home really means. Let me start at the beginning. When I bought the house on Cedarbrook Lane, I thought I had made it. I'm not a flashy guy. I didn't need a mansion or a corner office with a view. I just wanted a place of my own, a quiet home where I could work on my graphic design business and drink coffee in peace. After 10 years of city living, crammed apartments, and roommates who never washed their dishes, the suburbs seemed like paradise. The air was fresh, the lawns were trimmed, and my house, my perfect little sage green bungalow, was the one I dreamed about since I was a kid. Sage green. That color mattered to me more than most people would understand. It wasn't loud or garish. It was soft, unique, earthy. It felt alive. It reminded me of hiking trails with my dad. It reminded me of a summer I spent in Oregon, sitting on moss-covered steps with a notebook full of design sketches. For me, color wasn't just decoration. It was identity. The first few weeks were bliss. I repainted the shutters myself, added planters near the porch, and spent an entire Saturday putting together a handmade welcome sign. My neighbor across the street, Mr. Harris, a kind old widower, waved at me every morning. We exchanged muffins one Sunday. I felt like I was becoming part of something warm. Then, about 3 weeks after moving in, I got the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope, slipped neatly into my mailbox. No warning, no phone call, just an official-looking letterhead and the bold words, Notice of Non-Compliance, Exterior Color Violation. It said my house's paint did not conform with the Maple Creek HOA's approved color palette, which, according to them, was designed to maintain neighborhood cohesion and visual harmony. It stated that I was required to repaint my home in standard beige number 4 within 14 calendar days or face a fine of $100 per day. I genuinely thought it was some kind of clerical error. Maybe the letter was meant for someone else. I mean, who fines people over the color green? I called the HOA number listed on the bottom of the letter. A woman answered, polite but clipped, and transferred me to someone named Karen Whitmore, who introduced herself as the HOA board president. Mr. Miller, she said, her voice firm and efficient. Your current exterior color was not pre-approved by the board. Our neighborhood guidelines have been in place for over 30 years. But it's green, I replied, bewildered. Not neon, not dark forest, just a muted sage green. It blends in with the trees. Nevertheless, she said, Maple Creek homes must align with our aesthetics. The approved palette was voted on in 2002. Was sage green not an option in 2002? I asked, half joking. She didn't laugh. You can submit a variance request, but I can tell you now, it won't pass. We haven't approved an exception in over a decade. Our goal is uniformity, Mr. Miller. That's how we preserve property values and community standards. She might as well have said, that's how we make everyone look the same. I hung up feeling violated. It was my house. I bought it. I paid for the repairs. I had the deed in my name. And now, because I didn't choose the exact shade of pre-approved beige, I was being treated like I graffitied the walls. I thought, maybe if I spoke to someone in person, things might go differently. The next HOA meeting was in 4 days. I marked it on my calendar and showed up early. The room was in a small rec center, lined with beige folding chairs, ironically, and smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. There were about 30 people there, most of them retirees, chatting quietly. At the front of the room sat the board, 5 members, all in their 60s or older, and all dressed in matching Maple Creek badges. At the center, unsurprisingly, was Karen Whitmore. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and introduced myself. I explained that I was new to the neighborhood and unaware of the paint policy. I described the color I used, how subtle and earthy it was. I said I was more than willing to compromise, but that repainting an entire house was expensive and unnecessary. I just want to understand, I said, looking around the room. Are we really finding people over colors now? Karen leaned into her microphone. Mr. Miller, these policies exist to maintain visual cohesion. If we allow you to choose your own color, then what stops the next person from choosing neon orange or bubblegum pink? Rules protect everyone. I tried to appeal to common sense, but this is a neon orange. It's literally called wild fern. It's softer than some of the approved browns on the list. Another board member piped in. If we make an exception for you, we'll have to for everyone. I took a breath. Maybe that's not a bad thing. That's when the chuckles started. Quiet at first, then more noticeable. A woman behind me muttered, "Here we go." A man in the back leaned to his wife and whispered, "New people always think they can change everything." I left the meeting stunned. I had expected resistance, maybe some bureaucracy, but not this robotic commitment to sameness. I couldn't stop thinking about that phrase, visual cohesion. It felt like a polite way of saying, don't stand out. The next morning, another letter arrived. This one was more aggressive. Notice of fine accrual. Total to date $700. My stomach twisted. $700. For paint. It had barely been a week since the first letter. I couldn't afford to repaint the whole house and eat that cost. I certainly couldn't afford $100 every single day. I walked out onto my porch and noticed a woman 2 houses down staring at me. She quickly turned away. Later, when I took the trash out, I heard 2 neighbors whispering at the corner. That's the one who won't follow the paint rules. Yeah, well, rules are rules. The same night, Mr. Harris came over. He looked tired but kind. He handed me a small paper bag, banana bread. I heard what they're doing, he said quietly. Just wanted to say, I like the green. Reminds me of the old days, before the board got so particular. I thanked him. Is this normal? He chuckled sadly. Oh, son, last year they fined Mrs. Ellison for putting up a non-standard mailbox. Said the bronze finish didn't match. It was her late husband's. She cried for weeks. I felt something dark twist in my gut. This wasn't about community. It was about control. The HOA didn't preserve values. It squashed personality, all under the banner of rules. I tried one last time. I submitted a variance request, included photos of my house, offered to repaint just to trim if it helped. I even found color consultants who argued that sage green was neutral and non-offensive. I waited 2 weeks. Then I got the reply. Request denied. Repaint required. Non-compliance fines will continue until fully resolved. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the walls. Beige. It wasn't just a color. It was what they wanted me to become. Bland, quiet, assimilated. I thought about the years I'd spent working for this home. The late nights freelancing, the debt, the sacrifice, all for a house I could call mine. And now, they wanted me to repaint it, to erase it, to pretend it was never mine. I pulled out my laptop and started typing into the search bar. Can I sue my HOA? I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe validation, maybe a loophole, but I found something better. A blog by a woman named Elena Cruz, a civil rights lawyer. Her site was titled, Don't Just Settle, Stand. She had case studies, testimonials, news clippings. One headline read, HOA sued after banning front yard vegetable garden. Another, veteran wins appeal after HOA forces removal of flagpole. I sent her a message that night. Subject line, they want my house to be beige. She responded the next morning. Let's talk. You're not alone in this. And just like that, I wasn't just another homeowner with a fine. I was someone who was ready to push back. Not just for the color on my walls, but for the principle that home should mean something more than a line in a rule book. The first time I spoke to Elena Cruz, it felt like I was finally breathing fresh air after being trapped underwater for too long. Her voice was calm but sharp, like she'd been through enough of these HOA battles to know the terrain. She listened, really listened, as I told her everything, From the first letter to the laugh I got at the HOA meeting, to the neighbors who had quietly confessed they'd been too afraid to speak up. When I was done, she took a moment and said, "Jason, you're not crazy, and you're not wrong. They're overstepping. That's what they do." I didn't even realize how badly I needed someone to say that. Someone who didn't shrug and say, "Well, rules are rules." Elena had been practicing civil rights law for over a decade but had, as she put, stumbled into the HOA world after helping a disabled veteran keep a wheelchair ramp that his neighborhood committee tried to have removed for aesthetic disruption. Since then, she'd built a reputation as one of the few lawyers willing to push back on the self-appointed kingdoms these boards like to create. She asked for all the documents I'd received, the letters, the bylaws, photos of my house, meeting minutes in the last few years, and told me to give her a few days. I was skeptical anything could come of it, but I sent everything over anyway. 2 days later, she called me. Her voice had a spark to it this time. "They made mistakes," she said. "More than a few. The color list hasn't been legally updated since 2002. They've denied requests without documented justification. And the cherry on top? One of the board members, Tom Belson, owns a painting company that's been the preferred vendor for HOA repainting jobs for the last 3 years. That's a textbook conflict of interest." I nearly dropped my phone. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. He's made tens of thousands from HOA contracts alone. That's enough leverage to bring this to court. The color issue is a symptom. The real disease is abuse of power." It was the first time I felt like I might win this. Not just survive it. Actually win. Elena recommended filing for an injunction first, to freeze the fines and stop them from escalating while we prepared the larger suit. She explained that if we could demonstrate the financial and emotional harm being caused, a judge might grant us temporary relief. So we filed. I signed paperwork, made statements, and prepared to go public. The injunction was filed under the name Miller versus Maple Creek HOA. Just seeing my name in a legal header made my hands sweat. I wasn't used to being the center of attention, certainly not like this. But Elena assured me that discomfort, that's what people in power count on. They count on you being too afraid to be uncomfortable. But if you can sit in that discomfort long enough, it becomes strength. A week after filing, the neighborhood caught wind of what I'd done. It started with whispers. I noticed more blinds shifting when I walked by, more dogs getting walked past my house at strange times. One neighbor, Mrs. Blevins, who had once complimented my porch chairs, crossed the street entirely to avoid walking near me. But not everyone was cold. One evening, as I watered my plants, a teenage girl from 3 houses down walked by and said, "My mom says you're brave." I smiled, unsure what to say. Then, the media got hold of it. Elena had forwarded the story to a local reporter she knew. Just a small piece, a homeowner being fined for a harmless paint color. But the timing was perfect. The news cycle was dry, and something about the absurdity of it all, the beige requirement, the $100 a day fine, the phrase, standard beige number 4, struck a nerve. The headline read, "Homeowner fined over paint color takes HOA to court." Within 24 hours, the comments were rolling in. This is exactly what's wrong with HOAs. Beige tyranny is real. Fight the power, green guy. I became green guy online. There were memes. One had my house photoshopped into a riot scene with the caption, "When the grass is greener, but the house can't be." It was funny, but also surreal. Strangers across the country were suddenly rooting for me. One morning, I woke up to an email from someone in Arizona. "Thank you. I lost my mom's bird bath because of our HOA. Keep fighting." Elena used the media attention to full effect. She filed an amended injunction citing emotional distress, reputational damage, and arbitrary enforcement of outdated rules. She also requested a full audit of the HOA's financial dealings, especially any involving Mr. Belson's paint contracts. The HOA's tone changed fast. They called an emergency board meeting and posted flyers around the neighborhood warning residents not to engage with the media. Karen Whitmore sent out a community-wide email saying that my lawsuit was an unfortunate disruption to our peaceful neighborhood and encouraged people to remain loyal to our standards. loyal, like this was a monarchy. But the cracks were showing. I started receiving anonymous notes in my mailbox. One read, "Thank you. I've wanted to paint my house blue for years but didn't dare." Another, "They fined me $200 for a hammock." A hammock? One afternoon, a couple I'd never met rang my doorbell. They introduced themselves as Lisa and Marcus, longtime residents. "We just want to say we're behind you," Marcus said. "We've had issues with Karen for years. We've thought about moving more than once." "You're not alone," Lisa added. "They make you feel like you are, but you're not." That night, I cried. Not out of fear or anger this time, but relief. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for everyone who had been silenced by beige walls and silent rules. Then came the hearing. Elena had prepared me for everything. What to wear, how to speak, when to pause. But I still walked into that courtroom with my heart pounding like a jackhammer. The HOA had brought their own attorney, a well-groomed man in a navy suit who looked like he billed by the breath. Karen Whitmore sat beside him, wearing a pearl necklace and an expression like she was doing community service by being present. The judge, a soft-spoken woman named Judge Hamilton, listened carefully as Elena laid out the case. She showed photos of my house, described the color as non-invasive and complementary to natural surroundings. Then she pulled up the HOA's own bylaws. "This document," she said, holding up the packet, "has not been revised or publicly re-ratified in over 20 years. Yet, Mr. Miller is being fined as if it were federal law." She presented financial records showing Tom Belson's company had been awarded 17 paint jobs over the past 36 months, all of them paid through HOA funds. She pointed to a clause in the HOA's charter that clearly stated board members must recuse themselves from any contract that could result in personal gain. Karen looked like she'd bitten into a lemon. Their lawyer tried to argue that the rules were in place to protect homeowners and preserve visual harmony, but Judge Hamilton wasn't having it. "Visual harmony," she repeated, "while one man pays hundreds of dollars a day for not fitting in." After nearly 2 hours, Judge Hamilton ruled in our favor. She granted the injunction. No more fines, no repainting, no penalties. She also ordered the HOA to freeze any enforcement action against other residents until a full audit of their practices was completed. Karen was visibly stunned. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Walking out of that courtroom, Elena turned to me and said, "You just did more than keep your house green. You cracked the whole facade." We both knew this wasn't over. The full lawsuit would take months, maybe longer. But this was a victory, and not just a legal one. The day after the ruling, something unexpected happened. A few houses around the neighborhood started putting up small signs in their windows. Nothing loud, just simple phrases. "Color is not a crime. Stand up, speak out. Thank you, Jason." One house even painted their door a bright navy blue. It was quiet, subtle rebellion, but it was there. Even the neighborhood Facebook group, once dominated by board loyalists, started shifting. Posts about ridiculous HOA fines were getting hundreds of likes. A petition started circulating to vote for new board members at the next election. Karen tried to delete the posts. People reposted them. At night, I'd sit on my porch, drinking coffee, watching the sunset against my soft green walls, and think, this is what home is supposed to feel like. Not perfect, not uniform, but real, lived in, chosen. A few days later, Elena sent me a text. "You ready for round 2? I smiled and wrote back, "Born ready." The weeks after the injunction felt different. The air on Cedar Brook Lane, once stiff with suspicion and judgment, had shifted. Subtle things at first. Neighbors who used to avoid eye contact now gave small waves. The teenager who'd once called me brave helped me carry groceries one day. Mr. Harris started sitting outside in the evenings again. For the first time since the HOA letters began, I actually felt like I lived in a community. But the victory wasn't the end. It was just the start of the real fight. Elena reminded me of that constantly. The court had frozen fines, but the full case, our civil suit against Maple Creek HOA, was still moving forward. It wasn't just about me keeping my sage greenhouse. It was about systemic abuse, financial corruption, and the decades-long rule of a board that had never once been held accountable. She worked tirelessly over the next few months, gathering testimonies, digging through records, filing subpoenas. What we found was worse than I imagined. Dozens of violations. Fines issued without proper documentation. Appeal requests never even reviewed. And perhaps most damning, an internal email from Karen Whitmore to another board member saying, "If we don't stay strict, this neighborhood will fall apart. People can't be trusted to make their own decisions. They need us to protect them from themselves." That email hit me hard. It confirmed everything I'd felt since the first letter arrived. This wasn't about paint. It never was. It was about control. About the illusion that safety comes from sameness. About the quiet, creeping fear that if people are allowed to express themselves, even a little, the whole structure might collapse. Karen wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was guarding her power. The final hearing date was set for the end of May. Leading up to it, I started getting more messages, not just from Maple Creek residents, but from strangers across the country. A family in Texas whose HOA banned them from flying a pride flag, a retired teacher in Michigan who was fined for putting a mural on her garage door, a young couple in Florida who were ordered to remove the treehouse they built for their kids because it wasn't architecturally consistent. They all said the same thing. We didn't think anyone could fight back. That gave me purpose. Even when I was exhausted, even when I wanted to disappear. The night before the hearing, I didn't sleep. I paced my living room for hours. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the courtroom, the judge, the board's lawyer, Karen's expression. What if we lost? What if all of this, every word, every risk, every late night, meant nothing? But then I walked outside, barefoot on the porch, feeling the cool wood under my feet. The sky was deep blue, stars scattered like salt. And under the porch light, my house still glowed green, defiant, soft, mine. That calmed me. The courtroom was full that morning. Not just reporters, but dozens of neighbors, including faces I'd never seen before. Elena looked sharp, as always, dressed in slate gray, her hair pulled back, her voice calm and fierce. The HOA brought a new lawyer this time, probably more expensive, definitely more polished. But money doesn't win truth. Elena laid out everything. She started with the fines, the outdated color code, the arbitrary enforcement. Then she moved to the deeper issues, conflict of interest, abuse of power, the cultural atmosphere of fear and conformity. She read Karen's email aloud in court. You could feel the tension in the room shift as the words echoed. They need us to protect them from themselves. When Karen took the stand, she tried to hold her usual composure. But something had cracked. Maybe it was the pressure. Maybe it was the fact that people weren't looking at her with deference anymore. Some were outright glaring. She stumbled through her answers, deflected questions, tried to blame procedural tradition. But the judge didn't buy it. After closing statements, we waited. The judge took a brief recess to review the documents. I sat in silence, staring at my hands. Elena next to me, cool as ever. 20 minutes later, the judge returned. Her verdict was short but powerful. The court ruled that the Maple Creek HOA had overstepped its authority, misused funds, and engaged in a pattern of selective and punitive enforcement. The bylaws regarding property aesthetics were declared outdated and unenforceable unless updated through a transparent vote involving all residents. All pending fines were to be dropped. My lawsuit was settled with a judgment in my favor, and Karen Whitmore was ordered to step down from the board, effective immediately. I didn't realize I was crying until Elena put a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "You did it!" The room erupted into murmurs. A few people even clapped. Karen stood there, stunned, motionless. And then she just walked out. No words. No fight. Just a slow, quiet exit. Outside, reporters gathered. Neighbors congratulated me. Some wanted photos. Some wanted to share their own stories. It was overwhelming, but in the best way. I wasn't just the greenhouse guy anymore. I was the guy who stood up. The settlement included enough money to cover my legal fees, and then some. I donated a portion of it to start a new local initiative called the Homeowner Freedom Fund, a small grant program for people facing unfair HOA fines who couldn't afford legal support. We held a town meeting 2 weeks later, and for the first time in years, residents actually came willingly, not just to listen, but to speak, to vote. And when it came time to vote in a new board, something incredible happened. People nominated themselves. Neighbors who had never said a word before were now raising their hands, sharing ideas, proposing change. Not rebellion for its own sake, but renewal. The new board made their first decision unanimously. The HOA would no longer dictate paint colors. Homeowners could express themselves within reason, with only general community input required. The palette of beige began to fade, slowly, quietly. Over the next few months, the street began to change, not chaotically, but beautifully. A soft coral door on Birch Lane. A turquoise porch swing 3 houses down. Someone painted their garage a pale yellow with white trim. It looked like something out of a storybook. And my sage green house stood peacefully among them. Not louder, not brighter, just as it always had been. Part of something, but still its own. People stopped calling me brave. They started calling me neighbor. That word meant something new now. I hosted a small barbecue that summer, right on my front lawn. We grilled veggie burgers and corn, passed out lemonade, played music that drifted softly through the air. Kids ran around with chalk and bubbles. I'd never seen the street so alive. At one point, I caught Marcus, the neighbor who had once stopped by with Lisa to show support, standing across from my house, staring. He turned and grinned. Looks better green than it ever would have beige. I laughed. I think so too. That night, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned pink, I thought about everything. The fear, the fights, the loneliness, the weight of challenging something so rigid, so accepted. And I realized something. It's not that people want to be the same. It's that they're taught it's safer. We're taught that standing out invites trouble. That if you just follow the rules, even the absurd ones, you'll be left alone. That peace is the same thing as silence. But silence isn't peace. Peace is when you can breathe without asking permission. When you can paint your house and know it still belongs to you. That's what I fought for. And that's why I'm telling you this story now. Because somewhere out there, someone is being told to shrink, to fall in line, to strip the color out of their lives until they fit a template designed by people who forgot what it's like to live fully. This story, it's not about me. It's about all of us who've ever felt pressured to conform, who've been fined, judged, pushed out, or laughed at just for wanting to express something true. Maybe for you, it's not a house color. Maybe it's the way you dress or speak or who you love. Maybe it's the art you make, the ideas you share, the person you're becoming. And maybe there's someone telling you to stop. If so, I hope you remember this. You don't owe them beige. You don't owe them your silence. You owe yourself a home, a real home, in whatever color feels right to you. So now I'll leave you with one final question. What would you fight for, even if everyone told you not to? If this story moved you, even just a little, don't forget to subscribe. We've got more true stories of rebellion, justice, and the everyday people who decided to say no. And trust me, they only get better from here. Thanks for listening. Stay bold, and never let them paint over your life with beige.